Alright guys, BLM here back with a new video, and in this video, thanks to the recommendation of reality TV fan 721 in my Twitch chat, on this very special day, I'll be doing a retrospective on one of the most important pieces of media in Survivor history, that being Rob and Amber Get Married, a CBS special presentation from 20 years ago that details Rob and Amber getting married. Again, I never would have guessed that. And just genuine talk here, I actually didn't mind watching this. I actually thought it was kind of fun. It was actually a bit nostalgic considering I actually do remember watching this as a kid, where watching it again now, was just kind of funny. But again, just like my other retrospectives, I'll be running through this TV special from beginning to end, where right away we do start off with some really over-the-top narration saying that this is the tale of two survivors, that they met as all-stars and fell in love on Survivor and ran the amazing race, which thank God we got that added into it. And now there's only one adventure left, which, only one? Especially for Boston Rob. Again, this is just an outright lie. How dare they not have predicted that they would come back 15 years later for Winners at War. But again, this acts as this kind of like introduction to their relationship, where we get the typical confessional of Amber saying when they first met, she didn't like him that much, and us then cutting to Rob saying that he thought that she was smoking hot, which obviously is a funny dichotomy. But here we also get the reveal that they have to make this wedding happen in only 4 weeks. Which, why? Now, obviously, it's clearly just to add tension to the special and to make it all self-contained within this one specific episode. But again, it's the big question of can it be done in time, even though we get footage of the wedding in the intro here. But again, all this just really adds this feeling to the entire special. This is just so contrived, where obviously the only reason they're handling this wedding in this specific way is because they need it to be televised, which obviously is something that Romber had been actively campaigning for by the time of the All-Stars reunion, which is, again, really funny. Considering at the All-Stars reunion, we had Rob talking about how they've gotten so many offers, yet ultimately they end up just going with CBS by the end. What a shocker. But eventually we do start with Romber on a helicopter arriving at Atlantis Resort in the Bahamas with talk about how beautiful it is, which I really wonder if they sponsored the wedding here. And it's here where they end up meeting up with their wedding planner, that being Colin Cowie, popular wedding planner, again, known for having been on Oprah. I don't know who this guy is. This is where we get Rob giving his typical confessional, saying that he won't be going to the same bar as him, if you know what he means, because Rob still has to make homophobic comments at this point in time. But I will say, I was actually kind of surprised to see Rob still give his typical shtick in this wedding special, still giving these kind of demeaning style of confessionals that you would expect him to give on these more competitive shows. Where we see Colin talking about wanting them to set up a surprise for the other, with Rob just saying that he's out of his mind. With, again, this is really feeling like Rob hasn't really lost a step from his appearances on other shows. But here we get talk about how many guests do they need, with Amber saying 500. But again, Colin shuts this down, saying they need to be closer to 200, which Rob complains about here, saying that they already have 500 to 600 people to invite, which all this just felt so fabricated. First in how do you have that many people that you feel like are a necessity to bring to your wedding? Also, it really felt like this was just a thing to add to the show to allow for Romber to get into an argument later on in it about who to cut, where Rob says that someone has to give here and it's not going to be me. Either way, here we do have seeing Amber making all the design choices while Rob is really just bored off to the side until the topic of food comes up, which, again, as expected of Boston Rob, ends up lighting up here, saying that he's been thinking about foods the hour he proposed, which obviously he has his priorities set straight there. But this does lead to a funny moment of them being asked about what foods they want, and Amber saying that she wants soup and salad, only for Rob to then go on and on about steak and lobster and burgers and a pig on a spit and lamb and sausages. And again, clearly feel like Rob's kind of putting on this act in this scene. And this is always see Amber being annoyed here, saying that she doesn't want sausages. But this is followed up by a weird sequence of Boston Rob driving them in a cart to the reception area, where we get content about how he's driving like a madman, and we see Amber with her hands in her face, and all this is just so strange. But again, they end up deciding to get married on the beach, which is obviously where they fell in love, again, on the beach of Atlantis Resort, I guess. But following this, we have them return to Beaver, Pennsylvania, Amber's hometown, where from this point forward, we do end up following Rob and Amber, ending up spending most of their time separately, as obviously they do their own preparations for the wedding, starting off with Amber meeting her dress designer, where she decides to choose her mom's best friend, which, I mean, does further just show Amber being this, again, seemingly pretty normal, down-to-earth person in comparison to Rob's, again, more extravagant desires. But, again, I do feel like this ends up being, again, a pretty big risk here, obviously, to have a wedding on this massive of a scale, but deciding to go with a unknown dress designer who, again, works out of their home. Again, obviously perfectly fits in with Amber's personality. But, again, this is followed up with Romberg getting into an argument over the guest list, with Rob wanting all of his people to end up have a guest to invite as well, saying, what's the big deal? Oh, well, Amber wants to get rid of all the guests, being upset that why does all Rob friends get guests? And again, all this felt like a very scripted argument. And we do get like a weird comment along the way about how like Rob wants Amber to bring all of her single friends so that they can hook up with his friends. And again, I feel like that was kind of weird, but eventually we do see Rob end up complaining about this to Amber's mom, only for her to shockingly take Amber's side of the argument, with Rob saying letting them have guests is just respectful, because obviously that's what Boss Rob's known for being respectful. But anyway, this is followed up by the bridal shower, this seeming pretty tame, again, literally just a small party with Amber and a few friends. So we do get some drama here from Rob being meant to show up at the end to open gifts, only for him to be out ATV riding with his future brother-in-laws, which was random. And he ends up being late. Oh no. But along the way, he does end up stopping to buy her flowers to make it up to her, and somehow this actually works, despite the fact that Amber even calls out herself how performative this is. But again, I guess good for him. But following this, we have them now flying to Boston, with 3 weeks still until the wedding, with Amber wanting Rob to take dance lessons, leading to another seemingly fake fight over Rob not wanting to take any lessons, and Rob really coming off as a bit of a dick here, with him saying that if you want to go dancing, go with your friends. And again, this ends up leading to this, again, weird bit of like Amber saying that you said on the island that you wanted to dance, and this isn't the man I fell in love with, and it's not right for you to have made that up. And this is just a weird argument, feeling, it's just kind of scripted to me, and feeling like them wanting to make reference to Survivor in some way, which is why they added the island part here. But again, eventually Rob ends up giving in, and they take dancing lessons, which get played up as humorous, with talk about how flamboyant Rob looks, because haha. But also we got drama on how Rob gets upset at the instructor along the way, with her wanting them to come back for another lesson. He says no, even though they do anyway. But following this, we have Rob going out to the bar with his buddies and dropping a bomb on them, and that they're all going to Florida to help with his surprise, which ends up being that his dad built a house in Florida, I guess. Like, I don't know how. Again, it's never really explained. Like, I didn't know Rob's family was that well off to just buy a house in Florida for them. Though, again, I would not be shocked that this was simply a case of production had bought the house for them, and them obviously not wanting to openly admit that on the show. But again, this house ends up being in Pensacola, which, again, I don't know if they still live in this specific house now, but I do believe they still live in Pensacola to this day, which, again, kind of makes it weird for, like, why Pensacola? Why they say to move this far away from the rest of their family? Especially considering later on we get this pretty big segment how they're both going to miss their family when they move, to where it's like, well, then why'd you move this far to begin with? It's not like they have any attachment to this location in any way. So again, I really don't even understand why they end up moving here. But here we end up having Rob flying out with all of his friends to decorate the house. But along the way, Colin ends up calling Rob here. He ends up telling Rob here to meet up with him in New York, and Rob has a flight in New York now, where again, just the number of flights that Rob ended up taking over the course of this wedding special is pretty ridiculous, where I guess it's kind of the point of these, obviously, is they want to make these seem like very extravagant and portray things in a way that, again, is just so unnormal. But again, it did seem kind of insane just how much traveling they end up having to do, which clearly ends up taking a toll on them by the end. But again, Rob ends up going clothes shopping with Colin, showing him jackets, and we do get drama here from Rob saying that Amber doesn't want jackets at the wedding for some reason, only for them to call Amber and her to say she's fine with it. So that was so pointless. And this does lead to Rob then saying that he likes Colin, though I don't like him, you get what I'm saying? Because, again, we needed more homophobia. Either way, we then see Rob regrouping with his brother Mike, who was his family visit on Survivor All-Stars, to where they end up going to LA to pick items to furnish the house, going to a place that supposedly Amber likes, to explain why they're going all the way to LA for this when their house is in Pensacola. We do have Rob saying it's just like The Amazing Race all over again, because we need a reference to that. But here again, they end up playing up the humor of how funny is it that Rob is the one decorating the house. And in typical Rob fashion, we do see him going all out here, spending 50 grand in one shot, which is insane. So again, obviously this is all getting paid for. Again, it's not coming out of his pocket. But he ends up making a big deal here about this canopy bed that Amber has always wanted, a canopy bed, and thank God he got it for her. But beyond that, we also see him going back to Pensacola, where he ends up going to a hardware shop to buy paint. How riveting. And we do get this like weird moment of him picking out this like yellow color, but not liking the name, and proceeds to dub it Kick-Ass Yellow. So that happened. And this is all while Amber's working on her own surprise, wanting to blow Rob away by doing something pertaining to the Boston Red Sox, obviously his favorite team, to where we then go see Amber find an artist that Rob at one point said that he wanted a painting from, which I can't imagine Rob ever saying that, but also conveniently, this painter had painted a Boston Red Sox painting. How convenient. But again, we see Amber end up buying this painting and planning now to get it signed by the entire team, which, considering the amount of money that went into the special, I mean, clearly if they really wanted to, they could have just gotten the players together and gotten it signed pretty easily, but again, that doesn't make for good TV. So instead, we have to have Amber do it the hard way, getting the painting shipped through UPS to Fort Myers, the location of the Red Sox training camp, with us getting this weird moment of Amber saying that she needs it there tomorrow, only for the guy to laugh at her, saying that that's ridiculous, and then proceed to say he'll be there the next morning. But we do end up seeing Amber going alongside her sister in an attempt to track down the players and getting them to each sign it during spring training, with there being some mishaps along the way, like it raining and them being kicked out of the stadium because they were taking too much space, I guess. Again, that very much felt very scripted. But we do end up seeing Amber just yelling out players' names while outside, saying, "Come on, it's for Boston Rob," which I'm sure surely changed their minds. And again, definitely not a spot where production probably goaded these players into signing it. But again, they end up getting a good chunk of autographs here, where I did recognize one player here, Johnny Damon, the star of Celebrity Apprentice 7. But finally, we end up seeing Romber regrouping in the Bahamas with now only 10 days until the wedding, being there for the food tasting, where we get the same debate as before, with Amber being upset at how this is a man's meal, with them ending up settling on seafood. How riveting. But it's also at this point where we end up seeing Colin end up giving them new tasks to complete, with the structuring of this feeling very much like a video game, and how like they just completed the main mission, now they're being given other objectives to complete before the next main mission. Anyway, Amber also ends up getting a call from her dress designer who needs her back to be fitted, and we end up having Amber say she doesn't know how she's gonna find the time, which is like, I mean, did you not expect to have to get fitted? Like, that seems ridiculous. But this does end up leading to content about how overwhelmed they are, leading to this being portrayed as this big low point for them, with them flying back to New York, where we see Amber now and being overwhelmed with the entire filming process, but also just being genuinely sad about, again, having to move away from family. And we see her like sobbing in the cab, all while Rob is having a confessional, being pissed off that this was all supposed to be fun, and instead she's crying in the car, and that he's pissed. And again, this really did feel kind of manufactured, and even if it wasn't, it was still portrayed in a very melodramatic way. But we do end up seeing them working on their first task, writing their vows, with Rob clearly not taking this seriously, wanting them to write vows for each other, only for Amber to just look up a guide, to where, again, that ended up being kind of boring. But the next morning, we see them get to their next task, the reason why they went to New York, which was to meet with a master mixologist to create their own drink, because that was so important to do. And along with that, we then proceed to see Rob mocking this mixologist, saying in Boston he would have gotten his ass kicked, and that he's just a bartender, which again, all this was just so weird. But now we get to 8 days before the wedding, with them splitting up once again, both going to their own hometowns, with Amber getting her fitting and us getting to see her in her wedding dress, which I definitely cared about, all while Rob ends up picking up the wedding rings, which leads to them flashing back to the previous week where they had picked out the wedding rings, which it's like, why wasn't this on the show chronologically? This was very weird. But also here in Rob fashion, he proceeds to then buy another gift in getting Amber diamond earrings to splurge on her, because he's surely using his own money in this spot. But finally, that we have Rob returning to Pensacola with the reveal that his buddies did a good job decorating the house. I can't believe it, because surely they were going to let the house look like complete shit by the end of this special, where again, it would not even shock me if it was even his buddies that actually did this and it was just production. But either way, this is followed up by Rob then going back to Boston, with Amber now just there as well, because they have to get dancing lessons again, where we had seen them like practicing in their hotel room earlier, and here they still aren't that good, with Rob getting frustrated once again. But again, who cares, where this ultimately doesn't end up mattering anyway. Finally, we end up having this last supper for Rob at his family home, them eating a big Italian dinner with so much Coke on the table. But again, just a segment about how perfectly Amber fits into the family. But now we have Romber flying back to the Bahamas for the final time before the wedding, meeting up with JP, who's marrying them, who's shockingly not Jeff Probst. Where again, why didn't Probst end up marrying them, considering how often he talks about being an ordained minister? And just in general, it is very shocking the fact that Probst isn't in this special, along with any other Survivor or Amazing Race alumni, where again, you would think there would be at least a couple cameos along the way. That simply ends up never happening here. And I mean, to be fair, it's not like Romber was particularly popular in the alumni community by this point, where they had surely burned a lot of their bridges over the course of Survivor All-Stars. I know, like, at the actual reunion for that season, they were hanging out separately from the others, where I think they only were really talking to, like, Colby and maybe Jenna Lewis. But again, it isn't shocking that they weren't close enough to their fellow players to invite them to their wedding, especially when they could only invite 200 people. But again, you would think that the producers would kind of force them in. Again, you would think they would want these style of cameos here, but either way. But also here we end up having them have to choose where to go on their honeymoon. A choice between Dubai or the Maldives or Cabo, with them landing on Cabo because it's closer, which again, I feel like I would have had the opposite approach, especially considering how they're obviously not paying for any of this. Anyway, the guests end up starting to roll in, with them having a nighttime barbecue, and Rob ends up kind of being his selfish self and saying that it was most important to see his family, and then proceeds to say, and Amber's family, of course. Ballsy, we end up seeing them have crap tables set up, with Rob end up gambling here and winning, which is obviously foreshadowing to his poker career, effectively making this a prequel to Rob and Amber Against the Odds, which was surely intentional. Anyway, we now get to 2 days before the wedding, where you see them having their bachelor and bachelorette parties, which were pretty tame. Again, Rob ends up going fishing. Amber ends up going swimming with dolphins. Again, that was kind of boring. And the next day, we end up having their rehearsal dinner, where we do see them revealing their surprises to each other through a edited video, which felt so manufacturers. Obviously, like, who's putting these videos together? And we do end up seeing Rob getting his Red Sox painting, which was pretty funny, as the video they end up showing him is clearly just a rough cut of what we end up seeing on the show. But also here we see one player telling him to be faithful and stop cheating like you do in the games, which I felt like this was a very weird thing to say, especially when his future wife is right there. And it's not even like his gameplay style has any bearing on whether or not he would cheat in his real life relationships. But and we do have seeing Rob happy crying here, with clearly getting the best of him, and Amber saying that not too many people get to see Rob cry, which I mean, like, I did on Heroes for Villains. But Rob then obviously proceeds to outdo her in revealing again an entire fully furbished house, with again the video that's ended up being shown here felt very reminiscent to a scene from like Extreme Makeover Home Edition, with again a lot of focus on the canopy bed, because this then takes us to the wedding day, where we get a short montage of Cullen directing everything together, including them bringing in more sand to spread across the beach. But here we do have seeing Romber giving each other their final gifts, with, in tradition, Amber ends up giving a thoughtful gift here, giving Rob a necklace containing sand from the beach in Panama where they played All-Stars, and also a poem that her mom ended up giving to her dad on their wedding day, that Rob proceeds to laugh at when reading. Oh, well, we see Rob giving her those expensive earrings from earlier, though we do also through this get a pretty fun moment of Amber reading Rob's note in his accent, which was kind of funny to see. But here we do end up also seeing Rob giving each of his friends a gift from Tommy Bahama. Again, I'm sure he paid for and definitely wasn't a sponsor of this special. But we do end up wasting a lot of time here in the lead up to the wedding, with a lot of sentimental content from Romber talking through their relationship, which again, I don't really care. And that does take us to the wedding everyone's been waiting for, except for me. But really, for me, this is kind of where the special ends up dying, where honestly, I actually did, again, have fun watching the special up to this point, where there was just so much going on through the early portions of the special, but obviously that all slows down at the point where we get to the wedding. And while obviously this is what people want to see, they want to see the actual wedding ceremony, to me, it's like, I really don't care. Again, this is just so boring, where we obviously see Amber walking down the aisle, though we do finally see her dress getting stuck on the arch, which again, at least that's a little humorous. But following that, things go smoothly. We see the minister giving a long speech. Romber gives their vows, blah, blah, blah. And they end up saying, I do. Who cares? But I do find it very awkward that following this, they end up walking to the reception, to where they end up having a massive choir following them, led by BB Winans, who has a Wikipedia page, so good on him. But this is all like interlaced with like confessionals from Romber about how great the ceremony went, which was again just so strangely put together. And this does lead to their first dance. And what do you know? They mess it up with Rob saying that the dance lessons went out the window. So thank God those segments stayed in the episode. But then they end up having dinner and gloating about these being the biggest shrimp we've ever seen. Oh, also drinking their drink that they made and cutting the cake. And we also get fireworks because that was so necessary, along with a Junkanoo band coming in and dancing with them, bleeding into a montage of the wedding, which ends up being the end of the special, which was a very strange way of putting this all together. And to be fair, I don't really know how exactly you would naturally end this otherwise, where obviously this like fireworks celebration just makes sense as a break off point, where unless you were going to show post-wedding material, I don't really know how else you would end this. Though I just found how like all this was put together just kind of funny. And with that, again, that's the entire Robin Amber wedding special. One of the most important televised products in Survivor history. I mean, what would Survivor be without Romber getting married? Definitely would have gotten their long-awaited return on Survivor Winners at War, I'll tell you that. But again, really a serious review of the special. Again, I actually did genuinely think it was fun through the early portions of it. Again, while again, obviously all of it feels very manufactured. It just feels like something that again would never ever happen outside of the confines of them forcing Romber to do all these things in such a short time period. I think the hecticness of how quickly they had to do all these things actually again did lead to some fun TV, along with the fact that again Rob, again when he's not being homophobic, is again a very fun television presence, and Amber is also kind of a fun dichotomy to him, to where again I can think of Survivor episodes that are probably worse than Rob and Amber get married, so I guess that's some credit to give to it. But again, straight up, I just found this to be a really funny video to make. Obviously, I am releasing this on April Fool's Day. Well, obviously not necessarily the biggest joke video I could have made. I just found it really humorous, the concept of actually just making a retrospective in the way that I do for all my bigger reviews about Rob and Amber get married. Maybe expect a retrospective of Rob and Amber against the odds at some point in the next couple years. That's a possibility, but in general, obviously just expect more of the same style of content from the channel. But for now, that is the video. Thank you for watching.